The first reports of the P-51 Mustang reached the German High Command with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. Pilots and strategists alike described it as a sleek, fast, yet seemingly fragile aircraft, a far cry from the massive, heavily armed bombers and fighters Germany had come to dominate the skies with. When images and initial intelligence assessments landed on Hitler's desk, the Führer's reaction was dismissive, almost contemptuous. "A toy," he reportedly scoffed, waving aside the reports. To him, the Mustang appeared more a novelty than a threat, a light American fighter that could not possibly withstand the rigors of aerial combat against the experienced Luftwaffe. This underestimation would, however, soon prove catastrophic. At the same time, the very design that inspired such derision carried the seeds of its lethal potential. Engineers in the United States had combined speed, agility, and long-range capability in a way that had no precedent in the European theater. Its Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, coupled with an aerodynamic frame, allowed the Mustang to escort bombers deep into enemy territory, something no other Allied fighter could achieve with such efficiency. The German dismissals, the jokes, the casual assumption that it was harmless, all of these set the stage for one of the most dramatic reversals in air warfare history. By the time the Luftwaffe would finally encounter it in force, the Mustang would no longer be a curiosity or a toy. It would become a nightmare, tearing through formations that once flew unchallenged, and exposing the vulnerability of Germany's once dominant air fleet. The seeds of disaster had been planted in those early moments of ridicule. Long before the Mustang would inspire fear across the skies of Europe, its story began in the cluttered design rooms of North American aviation, where engineers labored over sketches and wind tunnel tests in the early 1940s. The project, initially driven by a British order for a lightweight, high-speed fighter, exemplified an unusual degree of transatlantic collaboration. The British Air Ministry, eager to supplement its fleet with agile aircraft capable of challenging German dominance, provided technical specifications and rigorous performance targets, while the American designers brought fresh perspectives, innovative construction techniques, and an appetite for experimentation. The result was a fusion of necessity and ingenuity that would soon redefine aerial combat. The Mustang's revolutionary character was evident even in its earliest prototypes. Its all-metal, laminar-flow wing design reduced drag dramatically, allowing it to slice through the air with unprecedented efficiency. Paired with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, licensed and adapted for American production, the aircraft could reach speeds surpassing 430 miles per hour, with a range long enough to escort bombers deep into the heart of Germany. Maneuverability, once sacrificed for speed and firepower in many designs, was here carefully preserved. The Mustang could dive, climb, and turn with a responsiveness that caught even seasoned pilots by surprise. Armed with 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns and capable of carrying bombs or rockets, it was a true multi-role fighter, adaptable to the shifting demands of a global conflict. Despite these innovations, skepticism remained. Many American commanders doubted that such a lightweight fighter could survive in the crucible of European air battles. Some British officers initially questioned whether the Mustang's range and performance could truly meet the demands of long bomber escort missions. And as intelligence trickled across the Channel and the Atlantic, Axis observers, relying on conventional assessments of aircraft weight and armor, dismissed it as another underpowered American novelty. Few could imagine that a single fighter, born of cross-continental collaboration and unconventional engineering, would soon shatter entrenched assumptions and turn the tide in the skies. It was in this crucible of innovation and doubt that the Mustang was forged, its potential invisible to most, yet encoded in every curve of its wing and the roar of its engine, a silent promise of the havoc it would soon unleash on the Luftwaffe. As the first detailed intelligence reports on the P-51 Mustang reached Berlin, Hitler's reaction was predictably dismissive, tinged with a mixture of amusement and arrogance. Briefings that might have raised alarm among lesser leaders instead elicited laughter and scoffing in the corridors of the Reich Chancellery. According to contemporary accounts, the Führer referred to the aircraft as a toy, and a minor nuisance unworthy of serious attention, convinced that Germany's mastery of the skies was unassailable. The Mustang, in Hitler's mind, was merely another experimental plane, incapable of challenging the seasoned pilots of the Luftwaffe or altering the balance of air power over Europe. This attitude was mirrored throughout the German officer corps. Many Luftwaffe commanders, conditioned by early successes and decades of meticulous training, shared the Führer's dismissive view. Reports of the Mustang's impressive speed, range, and maneuverability were often downplayed or ignored entirely. Within the propaganda machinery of the Third Reich, Allied aircraft were routinely portrayed as clumsy, underpowered, or technologically inferior, reinforcing the sense that the Luftwaffe's supremacy was beyond question. Posters, radio broadcasts, and public statements all contributed to a culture of overconfidence, fostering a dangerous underestimation of emerging threats. Yet beneath this veneer of certainty, the contrast with Allied innovation could not have been starker. While Germany clung to conventional metrics of aircraft strength, armor, armament, and production numbers, the Allies were quietly rewriting the rules of aerial warfare. The Mustang embodied a philosophy that valued range, speed, and tactical flexibility over sheer size or brute force. Every curve of its wing, every refinement of its engine, represented an intentional leap forward, a technological advantage designed to exploit the very weaknesses the Luftwaffe arrogantly assumed did not exist. In this collision of hubris and innovation, the stage was set for one of the most dramatic reversals of the air war. Germany's overconfidence blinded it to the lethal potential hidden in the Mustang's deceptively elegant frame. The very aircraft that Hitler mocked would soon expose not only the limitations of German assumptions, but also the extraordinary effectiveness of Allied ingenuity, delivering a blow that the Luftwaffe would struggle to recover from. By the time the P-51 Mustang began arriving in the skies over Europe, its reputation as a curiosity had already been cemented in Berlin and among the Luftwaffe. Yet, in practice, the aircraft quickly proved that skepticism had been disastrously premature. The Mustang's first combat missions were primarily focused on escorting long-range bombers, a role in which previous Allied fighters had struggled. American heavy bombers, vulnerable to concentrated German attacks, finally had a fighter capable of accompanying them deep into Reich territory, providing cover that significantly increased their chances of returning safely. From the outset, pilots recognized that the Mustang was more than a capable escort. Its combination of speed, altitude performance, and agility allowed it to dictate engagements rather than react to them. In the hands of skilled aviators like Major George Preddy and Captain Charles Yeager, who would later become legends, the Mustang could approach enemy formations undetected, strike decisively, and disengage before German fighters could mount an effective counterattack. Even during the earliest sorties, Luftwaffe pilots were startled by its ability to outmaneuver older Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs, particularly at higher altitudes where German designs had once dominated. Intelligence reports sent back to German command initially underestimated the Mustang's capabilities. Many in the Luftwaffe still clung to the belief that it was a lightly armored, fragile plane, one that could be dealt with easily once tactics were adapted. Yet first-hand encounters told a very different story. German pilots, expecting a routine engagement, were often met with a whirlwind of precise machine gun fire and near-impossible evasive maneuvers. Early records note the disbelief and frustration among Luftwaffe veterans who had previously counted on their air superiority as an unassailable advantage. These first clashes served as a warning that Hitler's dismissive toy was far from harmless. Reports of bomber missions returning intact, sometimes without a single loss, began to circulate, hinting at the deadly consequences of underestimating the Mustang. The aircraft, once mocked, had begun its transformation into a symbol of Allied dominance in the air, a stark embodiment of the technological gap Germany had failed to anticipate. Each sortie chipped away at the illusion of Luftwaffe invincibility, signaling that the nightmare in the sky was only just beginning. As the Mustang's presence in European skies grew, the implications for the Luftwaffe became undeniable. No longer could German fighters intercept Allied bombers with impunity or rely on concentrated attacks to inflict heavy losses. The P-51's long-range escort capabilities fundamentally altered the strategic calculus of air warfare. For the first time, Allied bombers could penetrate deep into the industrial heartlands of Germany with a significantly reduced risk of catastrophic losses, forcing the Luftwaffe to confront a stark reality. The skies were no longer theirs alone. The Mustang's endurance and speed allowed it to accompany formations on missions that had previously been considered suicidal. Bombers reaching the Ruhr, Berlin, or the synthetic fuel plants of central Germany were now shielded by a protective swarm of highly maneuverable fighters capable of engaging and dispersing German interceptors before they could concentrate fire. For Luftwaffe pilots, this was a bitter revelation. Missions that had once been exercises in dominance now became trials of survival. Attrition rates began to climb, and the seasoned crews who had once flown with near impunity found themselves exhausted and demoralized after repeated encounters with an aircraft they had underestimated. Individual dogfights vividly illustrated the Mustang's superiority. In one notable engagement, a formation of Messerschmitt Bf 109s attempted to ambush a bomber stream over Berlin, only to be met by a pair of Mustangs that climbed swiftly, outpaced their attackers, and fired with surgical precision. German pilots described the sensation as trying to hit a phantom. The Mustang's speed and maneuverability made it nearly untouchable. Another account recalls an American pilot diving from above, executing a series of split-S maneuvers, and dispersing an entire squadron before their leader could react. These encounters were no longer anomalies. They became the template for how the P-51 consistently dominated the skies. The psychological impact on the Luftwaffe was profound. Reports of attrition, exhaustion, and even panic began filtering up to command levels. Pilots who had once flown with confidence and precision found themselves second-guessing every engagement. Germany's strategic planners, who had relied on controlling the air to protect vital industries and infrastructure, now faced the grim reality that their supremacy could be challenged, and that Allied technological ingenuity had created an aircraft capable of turning the tide. In effect, the Mustang did not simply escort bombers. It reshaped the entire aerial battlefield, asserting a level of dominance that Hitler's mockery could never have predicted. The Mustang's growing dominance in the skies forced the Luftwaffe into a reactive and increasingly desperate posture. No longer could Germany rely on pre-existing fighter deployments to intercept Allied bombing raids. Entire squadrons had to be repositioned to counter the threat, often leaving other critical regions underdefended. Industrial centers, oil refineries, and transportation hubs, previously considered relatively secure, now faced repeated attacks under the watchful escort of P-51s. The constant need to respond to these long-range strikes stretched German air defense resources to the breaking point, revealing the profound strategic consequences of Hitler's early dismissal of the aircraft. Luftwaffe pilots bore the brunt of this shift. Attrition rates escalated as engagements with Mustangs became increasingly frequent and deadly. Experienced aviators, whose training had once given them near-total confidence in air-to-air combat, now faced a foe that could engage and disengage at will. The psychological toll was immense. Fatigue, stress, and declining morale compounded losses in skill and efficiency. Pilots described a pervasive sense of helplessness when facing Mustang formations, particularly during missions deep over the Reich where reinforcements were hours away or entirely unavailable. These human costs, combined with rising aircraft losses, created a vicious cycle that Germany struggled to break. The strain extended beyond personnel. Aircraft production, already under pressure from material shortages and Allied bombing campaigns, now had to accommodate replacements for losses inflicted by the Mustang. Factories were pushed to produce more fighters and repair damaged ones at a rate that increasingly lagged behind the losses incurred in combat. Every misjudgment, every initial dismissal of the P-51, translated into an operational deficit that compounded over time, weakening Germany's ability to contest the skies. Hitler's miscalculations further exacerbated the crisis. His insistence on prioritizing super-heavy bombers and ground attack projects over effective fighter countermeasures left the Luftwaffe ill-prepared to counter the Mustang's disruptive impact. Strategic decisions made under the assumption of continued air superiority now backfired spectacularly, as the Reich scrambled to plug gaps and recover lost ground. The Mustang, once a seemingly inconsequential toy, had triggered a domino effect, undermining Germany's air defenses and revealing how a single technological oversight could ripple across an entire military strategy. For the pilots on both sides of the conflict, the Mustang was more than an aircraft. It was a transformative presence in the sky, capable of inspiring awe, fear, and profound respect. American aviators, flying the new fighter into increasingly hostile territory, often recounted the adrenaline-fueled exhilaration of taking command of the skies. Major George Preddy, one of the top Mustang aces, described the experience of diving into enemy formations as like holding lightning in your hands, a combination of speed, maneuverability, and firepower that allowed pilots to strike with precision and vanish before the Luftwaffe could mount a coordinated response. For these men, the Mustang was a tool that magnified skill and rewarded courage, enabling daring tactics that had once been impossible with slower, shorter-range fighters. On the other side, Luftwaffe pilots faced an entirely different reality. Seasoned veterans, accustomed to dominating aerial encounters, often spoke of the psychological shock when confronted by the Mustang. Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs pilots, expecting routine engagements, found themselves outpaced, outmaneuvered, and disoriented by the fighter's performance. One German survivor recalled attempting a head-on attack only to find the Mustang climbing above him with impossible speed, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. Encounters that had once been tactical exercises in confidence and skill became exercises in survival, as even minor miscalculations could prove fatal. Amid the chaos, stories of heroism and ingenuity emerged. American pilots devised creative strategies to exploit the Mustang's advantages, coordinating dives, split-S maneuvers, and altitude-based attacks that overwhelmed even the most experienced German units. In one noted incident, a pair of Mustangs saved an entire bomber formation by intercepting a squadron of Me-109s, taking calculated risks to shield their charges and engaging with precision that left enemy pilots stunned. German accounts, though often tinged with bitterness, reflected grudging admiration. Surviving encounters required quick thinking, adaptive maneuvers, and nerves of steel, highlighting the stark contrast between expectation and reality when facing the aircraft. These personal experiences brought the larger story of the Mustang into human focus. It was not merely technology that reshaped the air war. It was the courage, skill, and adaptability of the pilots, operating under pressure and facing an adversary that had been underestimated at the highest levels. Each dogfight, each narrow escape, underscored the profound impact of the Mustang, turning what had been dismissed as a toy into a machine capable of rewriting the fates of men and battles alike. As the Mustang became more widely deployed, its impact on pivotal air campaigns began to crystallize, transforming isolated encounters into decisive turning points. One of the earliest demonstrations of its effectiveness came during the long-range bomber escort missions over Germany in 1943 and 1944. Allied heavy bombers, which had previously suffered devastating losses to concentrated Luftwaffe attacks, now enjoyed the protection of the Mustang's unmatched speed and firepower. These missions were not mere incremental gains. They were dramatic reversals in the air war, allowing bombing raids to strike deep into the industrial heart of the Reich with reduced casualties and greater strategic effect. Operation Point Blank, the concerted effort to cripple Germany's aircraft production and air defense capabilities, showcased the Mustang's transformative role. Mustangs accompanied bombers on missions to critical factories in the Ruhr and Berlin, intercepting German fighters with relentless precision. Luftwaffe units found themselves facing an enemy that could strike, retreat, and return repeatedly without succumbing to fatigue or mechanical failure. Dogfights during these operations often devolved into high-stakes contests of skill and nerves, with Mustang pilots exploiting their aircraft's superior climb rate, agility, and firepower to devastating effect. The results were both immediate and cumulative. Experienced German pilots were killed or grounded, aircraft losses mounted, and the psychological edge that the Luftwaffe had once enjoyed began to erode. Iconic encounters further highlighted the Mustang's influence. In one famous engagement, a small flight of Mustangs intercepted a squadron of Me-109s poised to attack a bomber formation over Leipzig. Using coordinated dives and tactical maneuvers, the Americans dispersed the Germans, protecting dozens of bombers that would have otherwise faced annihilation. In another campaign over the synthetic fuel plants of central Germany, Mustang pilots repeatedly penetrated Luftwaffe defenses, inflicting heavy attrition and forcing the Germans to divert reinforcements from other critical fronts. These events demonstrated not only the aircraft's technological superiority, but also its strategic leverage, reshaping German operational planning under duress. The cumulative effect of these battles was staggering. By mid-1944, the Luftwaffe was no longer the confident, dominating force it had once been. Attrition, exhaustion, and the constant presence of an agile, long-range adversary like the Mustang forced Germany to re-evaluate priorities, redistribute forces, and confront vulnerabilities that had long been ignored. What had begun as a seemingly minor addition to the Allied arsenal had become a cornerstone of aerial dominance, proving beyond doubt that Hitler's mockery had grossly underestimated the aircraft's transformative potential. By the middle of 1944, the grim reports arriving at Hitler's headquarters could no longer be dismissed with laughter or derision. The Luftwaffe was hemorrhaging pilots and aircraft at an unprecedented rate, and the long-range bombing raids that the Reich had once believed controllable were now achieving near-total penetration. Hitler, who had initially mocked the Mustang as a toy, found himself confronted with the tangible consequences of his misjudgment. Internal communications reveal a mounting frustration, as generals and staff officers debated increasingly desperate strategies to counter what was quickly recognized as a critical threat to German air defense. In meetings of the High Command, blame was assigned and reassigned with frantic energy. Some argued that production deficiencies had left the Luftwaffe under-equipped, while others criticized training programs, claiming pilots were insufficiently prepared to face the Mustang's revolutionary capabilities. Even seasoned officers, once confident in their dominance, acknowledged the psychological toll on their units. Pilots returned from missions exhausted, demoralized, and shaken by encounters with an aircraft they had been taught to underestimate. Hitler's attempts to impose quick fixes, accelerated fighter production, redeployment of elite squadrons, and even last-minute tactical innovations were only partially effective and often too little, too late. The contrast between early mockery and belated recognition could not have been starker. A machine once casually dismissed in intelligence briefings had forced a fundamental re-evaluation of German strategy. The P-51 had transformed the skies from a domain of near-absolute Luftwaffe control into a contested battleground where skill, innovation, and technology dictated survival. Hitler's own hubris, coupled with his unwillingness to heed early warnings, magnified the consequences of this oversight. The Mustang, in essence, had turned his earlier laughter into a source of mounting anxiety, exposing vulnerabilities that would resonate across every layer of Germany's military planning. In these moments of belated realization, the Führer and his generals confronted a hard truth. The Mustang was no mere novelty, no insignificant toy. It was a decisive instrument of Allied power, reshaping the air war and leaving the Luftwaffe scrambling to respond to a threat it had once casually dismissed. Hitler's misjudgment had not only emboldened the Allies, but had also set the stage for one of the most dramatic reversals of fortune in aerial history. By the close of the European Air War, the P-51 Mustang had firmly cemented its place in history as a decisive factor in securing Allied air superiority. Its combination of speed, range, maneuverability, and firepower allowed the Allies to penetrate deep into German territory with unprecedented confidence, dramatically reducing bomber losses and crippling the Luftwaffe's ability to defend critical infrastructure. The Mustang did not merely protect bombers. It redefined the operational possibilities of air warfare, demonstrating how innovation and technological foresight could decisively alter the balance of power. In the post-war years, the Mustang's influence extended far beyond its combat record. Aviation designers studied its laminar flow wings, engine integration, and aerodynamic efficiency, incorporating lessons into future generations of fighters. The aircraft became a symbol of ingenuity, a benchmark for performance, and an enduring icon in popular culture. Air shows, museum exhibits, and countless stories celebrated the Mustang not only as a military tool but as a marvel of engineering that changed the very way wars were fought. Its legacy, therefore, was both practical and symbolic, a machine that exemplified the potential of thoughtful design, adaptability, and bold innovation. The historical irony of the Mustang's success remains striking. Hitler, who had once dismissed it as a trivial novelty, never fully anticipated the consequences of underestimating a single aircraft. What he considered a toy had, in reality, become a nightmare for the Luftwaffe, a relentless force that exposed the flaws of German assumptions and hubris. This juxtaposition between initial mockery and ultimate dominance underscores a timeless lesson in military history. Technological underestimation can carry catastrophic consequences, and innovation, even when quietly incubated across the ocean, can overturn entrenched power structures. Ultimately, the P-51 Mustang is remembered not only for its wartime triumphs, but for the broader lessons it embodies. It transformed the European air war, redefined the role of long-range fighters, and left an indelible mark on aviation history. From the moment it first took flight to its decisive impact over Germany, the Mustang story remains a testament to the power of ingenuity, courage, and the profound consequences of dismissing the unexpected. The story of the P-51 Mustang is, at its core, a tale of transformation, of how a single aircraft could shift the trajectory of a global conflict through a combination of design brilliance, tactical innovation, and human courage. From its inception in the design rooms of North American aviation to its baptism by fire over the skies of Europe, the Mustang embodied the spirit of Allied ingenuity. Its sleek lines, laminar flow wings, and powerful Merlin engine were not mere technical specifications. They were the manifestation of a vision that valued adaptability, speed, and precision over brute force. In combat, these qualities became lethal advantages, elevating the aircraft from a curiosity to a decisive instrument of war. The arc of the Mustang story is inseparable from the dramatic irony of Hitler's initial reaction. The Führer, dismissing it as a trivial novelty, had underestimated not only the aircraft but the creativity and determination of the pilots who would fly it. Luftwaffe pilots, conditioned to dominate the skies, were shocked and demoralized by the Mustang's unexpected capabilities. As missions progressed, as dogfights raged over Germany, and escort missions deep into enemy territory succeeded with increasing frequency, the consequences of that early mockery became painfully clear. What had been written off as a toy emerged as a nightmare, systematically dismantling the Luftwaffe's operational strength, draining its experienced pilots, and forcing strategic recalibrations that came too late to alter the course of the war. Yet beyond its tactical and strategic impact, the Mustang stands as a symbol of ingenuity and foresight triumphing over hubris and complacency. It illustrates the power of innovation, collaboration, and courage to overcome entrenched assumptions, and it demonstrates how meticulous engineering paired with daring execution can redefine the rules of conflict. Every sortie flown, every bomber saved, and every enemy fighter downed reinforced its reputation not only as a machine of war but as a turning point in history, a testament to the ways in which foresight, talent, and technology can decisively shape outcomes. In the final reckoning, the P-51 Mustang transformed from a ridiculed novelty into one of the most feared and respected fighters of World War II. Its story closes with a vivid lesson in irony and consequence. A joke in Hitler's mind became a weapon of extraordinary potency, altering the skies of Europe, tipping the balance of power, and cementing the Allied path to victory. The Mustang's legacy endures, not merely in museums or history books, but in the enduring idea that ingenuity, precision, and bold vision can turn the most underestimated force into an instrument capable of changing the world.